The church was heavy with silence, broken only by the rain pressing on the roof. Amara stood at the front, her black gown flowing to the floor, her veil brushing against her cheeks. Her hands trembled as they clutched the folded paper. Behind her, her mother sat stiff, a white handkerchief crumpled in her fist, already soaked through with tears. The coffin lay between them all. Polished mahogany, brass handles that glimmered under dim light. Atop it, the framed photograph of Chief Anozi Okafor, a man whose laughter had once carried through their home, whose name commanded respect in boardrooms and markets alike. Amara cleared her throat and began. "My father was a man of honor," she said. Her voice carried, though the edges quivered. "He taught me the value of hard work, the dignity of silence, and the beauty of family. His laughter filled our home. His hands built our future. Though today we say goodbye, his spirit will never leave us." Murmurs of agreement swept through the crowd. Neighbors nodded. Colleagues dabbed their eyes. Amara's younger brother bowed his head, his jaw clenched to keep from breaking in front of everyone. It was meant to be a perfect farewell. But funerals, like life, rarely go as planned. The doors at the back of the church creaked open. Slowly, loud enough to turn heads. Whispers spread like fire. A group stepped inside. 6 of them. Their clothes were plain, their sandals caked with red dust. They didn't belong to this city crowd. They carried the smell of travel, the weight of roads unkind. At their center was a woman wrapped in faded blue cloth, her back straight, her gaze fixed on the coffin. Every eye followed her as she walked forward, undisturbed by the murmurs. Amara froze at the lectern, her voice lost. Her mother stiffened on the pew, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. The woman in blue stopped halfway down the aisle. She lifted her chin and spoke. Her voice cut through the air. "We too have come, to bury our husband." Gasps exploded. The silence was no more. What did she say? Husband? What is this? The whispers grew into a storm. Amara's mother rose sharply to her feet, her veil falling back to reveal eyes blazing with fury. "You dare stand in God's house and speak such blasphemy?" She spat. Her voice was sharp enough to cut stone. The woman in blue did not flinch. She only pressed her hand to her chest. "We speak only the truth. He was our husband. He was our father." As if to prove her words, a boy emerged from behind her. No older than 10, his clothes were neat but simple, his small hand clutching her wrapper. His eyes, wide, innocent, searching, fixed on the coffin. He hesitated, then looked directly at Amara. "Papa," he whispered. The sound carried in the stillness. It was small, but it struck like thunder. Chaos erupted. Some gasped in shock. Others rose from their seats, craning to see. The priest pounded his staff on the ground, calling for order, but the congregation had already split in whispers and accusations. "That cannot be true. She lies. But the boy, look at him." Amara stood frozen at the lectern, her breath caught in her throat. The paper in her hand slipped and fluttered to the ground. She could not move, could not think. The boy's eyes were still on her, wide and unblinking, as though they shared some secret she didn't understand. Her mother lunged forward, pointing a trembling hand at the woman. "Get out of here! You are liars! You dare stain my husband's burial with such madness?" But the woman did not move. She stood her ground, shoulders squared. Behind her, the others remained silent, their faces heavy with something stronger than shame, conviction. "Chief Anozi was our husband," the woman repeated, "and this is his son. We came to pay our last respect." The word struck Amara like a stone to the chest. Husband. Son. Her father, the man she had adored, the man she had praised before this very crowd. Was this the truth? She shook her head, whispering under her breath, "No. No, it's not possible." But the whispers around her grew louder, circling her like vultures. Her brother tugged at her sleeve, his face pale. "Amara, is it true?" She had no answer. The priest raised his hand, desperate to restore order. "Please, please, this is a house of God. Let us—" But his voice was drowned by the voices of the mourners, rising, breaking into chaos. Amara's mother screamed again, "Lies! Lies!" The boy clung tighter to the woman's wrapper, his innocent eyes filling with tears. He looked once more at the coffin. "Papa," he repeated. And just like that, the storm inside the church broke loose. The church never truly recovered from that moment. Even after the coffin was lowered into the ground, the whispers clung to the air like smoke that refused to fade. People left in scattered groups, voices hushed but sharp. Some avoided Amara's gaze entirely, others gave her pitying looks, and a few shook their heads, as if betrayal had stained her family name. Amara stood by the graveside, her gown brushing against the wet earth. The rain had stopped, but the ground was soft, swallowing the flowers laid on the coffin. She watched the boy, watched him standing close to the woman in the faded wrapper. He was staring at the grave with a stillness far too heavy for his young body. Her mother grabbed her arm. "Don't you dare look at them, Amara. They are nothing. Nothing but liars." Amara's lips parted, but no words came. Something about the boy's eyes unsettled her. Something she could not explain. Her mother's grip tightened. "We will not give them the dignity of attention. Do you hear me?" Amara nodded faintly, but her mind was elsewhere. Later that night, back in their home, the silence was sharper than the grief. The family house, usually filled with the scent of cooking and the hum of conversation, felt hollow. Only the ticking clock and the occasional sob from her mother filled the air. Amara sat in her room, staring at her father's photograph. The words of the woman echoed in her head. "We too have come to bury our husband." Her chest tightened. Could it be true? Could the man she had worshipped, the man who had raised her with such discipline and pride, have lived another life in the shadows? She shook her head violently, tears springing to her eyes. No, it's not possible. He would never. But even as she said it, she remembered moments. Little things. Times when her father would disappear for days with no clear explanation. Times her mother's voice had grown sharp with suspicion, only to be silenced with gifts or apologies. A knock came at her door. It was her brother. His face was pale, his eyes wide. "Amara," he whispered. "People are talking. They're saying, 'That boy looks just like Papa.'" Amara swallowed hard. "Stop it. Don't say that." "But what if—" "I said stop." Her voice broke, sharper than she intended. Her brother flinched, then lowered his gaze. She softened, her hand reaching for his. "We don't know anything yet, and we will not shame our father's name with rumors." But deep inside, doubt coiled like a snake. Days turned to weeks, but peace refused to return. In the office, Amara felt eyes follow her. Colleagues spoke softer when she entered the room. Her father's reputation, once her shield, now hung heavy as a question mark. One afternoon, she sat across from potential investors in a brightly lit boardroom. She had rehearsed every detail of her pitch, confident in her presentation. Yet midway, the lead investor leaned back, folding his arms. "Chief Okafor's daughter," he said slowly, as if tasting the words. "I heard some unsettling news about your family." Amara stiffened. "My personal life has nothing to do with the company." The man exchanged glances with his partners, then smiled thinly. "Perhaps, but trust is everything in business. And if a man could lie to his family for years, how do we trust what his daughter says about numbers on a page?" Her breath caught. She tried to respond, but the words crumbled. The deal slipped through her fingers. That night, she collapsed on her bed, tears soaking her pillow. "Why?" she whispered. "Why now? When I need strength the most?" But there was no answer. Only the memory of that boy's innocent voice. "Papa." Sleep eventually took her, but it was not kind. She dreamed of her father. He stood in a small hut she did not recognize, the walls bare except for a single oil lamp. His face was pale, his eyes wet. He reached for her, whispering words she could not hear. Behind him, shadows shifted. A child's laugh echoed. Then the lamp flickered and died. Amara woke with a start, her body drenched in sweat. Her heart pounded in her chest. She sat up, pressing her hands to her face. It was just a dream. Just grief, playing tricks. But then she noticed something. On her desk, beside her father's framed photograph, lay a small scrap of cloth. Faded blue. The exact shade of the woman's wrapper at the funeral. Her blood ran cold. She had never seen it before. Amara staggered back. Her breath shallow. Her eyes darted around the room. Who is here?" she whispered. But the house was silent. Her mother's voice called faintly from the corridor, breaking the stillness. "Amara? Are you all right?" Amara shoved the cloth into her drawer. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice trembling. But she wasn't fine. Not anymore. Something was following her. Something she could not explain. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Morning came with no peace. Amara sat at the breakfast table, staring at her untouched plate of yam and eggs. Her mother moved about the kitchen, her movements sharp, deliberate, as if she could slice grief apart with the edge of her knife. "Eat something," her mother said without looking at her. "I'm not hungry." "You've hardly eaten in days." Amara pressed her fingers to her temple. "Mama, please, not today." Her mother stopped, her shoulders stiff. She turned slowly, her face stern. "I don't want to hear you speak of those people again. Do you hear me? Your father is gone. Whatever stories they tell, they died with him." Amara nodded faintly, though her mind was far from agreement. She remembered the cloth on her desk, the dream, the boy's eyes. They wouldn't leave her. Later that afternoon, as she drove through the city for a client meeting, the car engine sputtered. She frowned, glancing at the dashboard. The fuel gauge was fine, no warning lights. But then, without reason, the car jerked violently and skidded across the wet road. Tires screeched, horns blared. She wrestled the wheel, narrowly avoiding a collision with a truck. Her car came to a halt at the roadside. Her hands shook against the steering wheel, her breath ragged. Passers-by stared, some shouting at her. She whispered, "What's happening to me?" It wasn't just the accident. In the days that followed, small things piled up like stones crushing her chest. A vase fell from her shelf with no one near it. Her laptop crashed, wiping an entire month's work. A deal she thought secure was suddenly pulled away. And every night, always, without fail, she dreamed of her father in that same hut, his lips moving, whispering words she couldn't hear. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in streaks of orange and ash, a knock echoed at the front gate. Amara, restless from her thoughts, stepped out to answer. An old man stood there. His back was bent, but his eyes were sharp as steel. He wore a brown wrapper and carried a walking stick carved with symbols she did not recognize. "Good evening," Amara said cautiously. He nodded. "You are Amara, daughter of Chief Enozi." She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. And you are?" "I am Nanadi," the old man said, "elder of Okofia, the land your father came from." Her breath caught. She tightened her grip on the gate. "Why are you here?" He leaned closer, his voice low but firm. "Because the dead do not sleep when their truth is buried alive." Amara swallowed. "I don't understand." "You will," he said. "Your father built a house on two foundations, one of pride, one of silence. Now that silence is breaking, and it will not stop until you face it." She shook her head, fear prickling her skin. "Please, leave. My family has suffered enough." But Nadi's gaze did not waver. "Suffering will only grow. The land remembers child. Blood cannot be silenced." Before she could reply, her mother stormed out from the house, her voice sharp. "What are you doing here? You have no right." The old man straightened as much as his back would allow. "I come with warning. If the daughter refuses the truth will find her. And it will not be gentle." Her mother slammed the gate shut with a clang, pushing Amara inside. "Don't listen to them. They want to drag us into their filth." But Amara couldn't shake the elder's words. The land remembers. Blood cannot be silenced. That night, she sat on her bed, staring at the moonlight spilling through the curtains. She whispered to herself, "What if he's right? What if this is why I can't find peace?" Sleep crept in slowly, and with it, the dream returned. This time, clearer. Her father stood in the hut, his face drawn, his hands outstretched. His lips moved again, but at last she could hear faint words. "Go back. Home." Her eyes flew open. Her heart pounded. The dream was no longer just a dream. It was a command. By dawn, she made her decision. She packed a small bag, ignoring her mother's protests. "You will not go there," her mother shouted, blocking the doorway. "That place has nothing for you but shame." Amara's voice trembled, but her resolve was firm. "Mama, I have to. I need to know the truth. I need to see where he came from." Her mother's eyes brimmed with tears. "If you go alone." Amara looked at her, her chest heavy, but she stepped past her. For the first time, she felt the weight of her own footsteps. The journey was long. The city roads gave way to highways, then to narrow paths flanked by endless stretches of green. The air changed. The noise of Lagos was replaced by the hum of insects, the rustle of trees, the rhythm of drums echoing faintly from distant compounds. When she finally arrived, the village lay before her. Simple mud houses with tin roofs, children running barefoot, women carrying water pots on their heads. And at the far end, waiting, was the family she had tried so hard to ignore. The woman in the faded wrapper stood with the boy at her side. The boy's eyes widened when he saw Amara. For a moment, the world held its breath. Amara's own breath shook. This was no dream. This was real. And there, in the shadows of her father's old hut, her journey into the silence truly began. The village air felt different, thicker, heavier, as if the trees themselves listened to her every breath. Amara walked slowly, her bag clutched to her side, eyes darting at curious faces. Whispers trailed behind her like shadows. "That's her? The daughter from Lagos? She came after all." At the edge of the compound, the woman in the faded wrapper stepped forward. The boy clung to her side, his innocent eyes wide with hope. Amara's heart twisted. She wanted to hate them, but the boy's gaze disarmed her. The woman spoke first, her voice steady. "You came." Amara nodded faintly, though her throat was dry. "I came to understand." "You will," the woman replied, her eyes heavy with something deeper than bitterness. She turned and led the way into her father's old hut. The hut was small, the air thick with dust and memories. A mat lay rolled in the corner. A stool sat by the wall. And there, against the far side, stood a wooden chest. Its surface was scarred with age. But one detail froze Amara in place, her name carved faintly into the lid. Her breath caught. She stepped closer, running her trembling fingers over the letters. This was from me, she whispered. The woman in the wrapper folded her arms. He left it behind. Said one day, you would return. Amara knelt, her hands shaking as she unlatched the chest. The wood creaked open, revealing its contents. A bundle of letters tied with frayed rope, old photographs, and a folded piece of paper that looked like a will. Her chest tightened. She picked up the letters first. Her father's handwriting. Familiar, firm, yet heavy with sorrow. My daughter, one began. If you are reading this, then it means the silence I carried has broken. I loved you. I loved your mother. But I also loved another. I built 2 lives, foolishly believing I could keep them apart. Forgive me, Amara. I could not choose, so I left the choice to fate. Tears blurred her vision. She flipped through the photographs, her father smiling, holding a younger version of the boy, her father standing beside the woman in the wrapper. Images that proved what her heart had fought to deny. Finally, she unfolded the will. The paper shook in her hand. His voice echoed in her mind as she read the words. To my children, both bloods of my heart, what I leave behind is not land or wealth, but unity. The land in Okofia is to be shared equally between my families. For if my blood is divided, my spirit will never rest. The words struck her like a hammer. Share? With them? Before she could process it, a voice broke into the room. You think we will share with her? Amara turned sharply. A young man stood at the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, his eyes burning with resentment. Behind him, 2 others hovered, their expressions just as cold. The woman in the wrapper lowered her gaze. Cheek, not here, not now. But Cheek stepped forward, his finger pointing at Amara. She lived in comfort, in the city, with all the wealth, all the chances. And we grew with nothing. Now you come here, and you think you can take what is ours? Amara rose, her voice shaking but firm. I didn't come for land. I came for the truth. Truth? Cheek spat. The truth is, you are not welcome here. Tension crackled in the air. The boy clutched his mother tighter, his eyes wide with fear. Amara's heart pounded. She held up the will. This is what Father wanted, for us to be one family, to share, not to destroy. Cheek snatched the paper from her hand, his fists trembling. He tore it in half, then in half again. The pieces fluttered to the ground like dead leaves. His words mean nothing, Cheek roared. We will never bow to Lagos, children. The room erupted into shouts. The woman in the wrapper pleaded, but her son's anger drowned her out. Amara tried to speak, but the fury in their eyes silenced her. Then, in the midst of the chaos, someone knocked over the oil lamp on the stool. The flame licked the ground, catching on the straw mat. Within seconds, fire spread across the hut. Smoke filled the air. Fire! Someone screamed. The children outside shrieked. The villagers rushed forward, carrying buckets of water, but the blaze moved too quickly. Amara staggered back, coughing, her gown catching sparks. She stumbled toward the doorway, her vision blurred. Cheek and his brothers scrambled to save what they could, but the chest was already consumed by flames. The letters, the photographs, everything burned. The boy clung to Amara's arm, his small voice crying, Don't let it burn! Don't let Papa's house burn! But the fire roared, greedy and merciless. The hut collapsed inward, sparks flying into the night sky like angry spirits released. The villagers stood in stunned silence, the glow of the flames reflecting in their eyes. Some whispered that it was an accident. Others murmured that it was a sign, that the ancestors themselves had risen in anger. Amara stood trembling, ash clinging to her veil, her face streaked with tears and smoke. She looked at the boy, at the family she never wanted, at the ruins of her father's truth. And for the first time, she realized this was no longer about choice. The silence her father carried had erupted into fire. And now, the burden of uniting what he had broken rested on her shoulders. The fire reduced the hut to ash by dawn. Smoke still curled into the pale morning sky as villagers gathered around the ruins, their whispers sharp, their eyes wary. An abomination, one muttered. The ancestors are angry, another said. They will not rest until the families make peace. Amara stood among them, her gown singed, her face streaked with soot. She had not slept. She had watched the embers die, watched the chest, her father's truth, turn to dust before her eyes. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. We will not give them the dignity of attention. But the elder's voice was louder. The land remembers. Blood cannot be silenced. She turned to the boy, who clung to her arm. His eyes were swollen from crying, his small body trembling. Amara knelt, brushing his cheek with her soot-stained hand. "Your father loved you," she whispered. "He loved us all. And I will not let his memory turn to ashes." Before the boy could answer, Cheek's voice cut through the crowd. "You speak like you own his name." He stepped forward, his jaw clenched, his fists balled at his sides. His brothers flanked him, their faces set with the same fire. "But you are not of us. You belong to Lagos, to wealth, to privilege. You know nothing of our suffering." Amara rose slowly, her gaze locked on his. Her voice trembled, but not with fear, with anger. "You think I asked for this life? You think I chose which house I would be born into? Father gave us the same blood. That is not my doing, or yours. But what we do with that blood, that is our choice," the villagers murmured. Some nodded, some frowned. Cheek spat on the ground. Fine words, but words cannot feed hungry mouths. Words cannot repair what he broke. From the crowd, Elder Anadi stepped forward, his walking stick tapping the ground. His voice carried, low and firm. "Young men, young women, your father made mistakes, but he left behind a path to healing. The land he spoke of, the shrine he built, it was not for wealth. It was for unity. And until his children honor it together, his spirit will wander without rest." Amara's heart pounded. "What must we do?" The elder's eyes burned into hers. A ritual, simple, yet heavy with truth. Both families must pour libation together, at the shrine, acknowledging one blood, one lineage. Only then will peace return. The crowd hushed. All eyes turned to Chike. His jaw worked, his chest heaved. At last he barked, "I will not kneel beside her." But the woman in the faded wrapper, his mother, laid her hand on his arm. "My son," she said softly. "Enough. Your father's silence has already destroyed too much. Do not let it destroy you." Cheek's eyes wavered. He looked at his mother, then at his younger brother, the boy still holding Amara's hand. For a moment, the fire in him dimmed. Hours later, as the sun dipped low, the two families gathered at the shrine. It stood at the edge of the village, a small earthen altar beneath an ancient tree. Offerings of kola nuts, palm wine, and white cloth lay upon it. Amara stood across from Chike, her hands trembling. The villagers formed a circle around them, chanting softly, calling on the ancestors to witness. Elder Nanadi handed Amara the gourd of palm wine. "Pour, daughter of Anozi," he said. She stepped forward, tilting the gourd slowly. The wine splashed onto the earth, dark against the soil. Her voice cracked, but she spoke firmly. "For my father, who carried silence in his heart. For my mother, who carried pain in her spirit. For my brother, who carries doubt in his eyes. I pour this for unity." She passed the gourd to Chike. His hands tightened around it. For a long moment, he did not move. The villagers held their breath. Finally, with a grunt, he poured. His voice was rough, but it carried. "For my father, who left us with questions. For my mother, who raised us in shadows. For the blood I share with her, whether I want it or not. I pour this for peace." The ground drank the wine. The shrine seemed to breathe. The wind stirred the branches of the ancient tree, carrying with it a stillness that felt like relief. The elder raised his staff. "It is done. The ancestors have witnessed. What was broken has begun to mend." A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. Some wept. Some smiled. Amara looked at Chike. Their eyes met. Not with love, not yet, but with the fragile thread of understanding. She bent and lifted the boy into her arms. He buried his face against her shoulder, his small voice whispering, "Does this mean we are one family now?" Amara's throat tightened. She kissed his forehead. "Yes," she said softly. "One family. Always." The villagers dispersed, the chants fading into the evening air. Amara stood by the shrine, staring at the soil darkened with palm wine. Her father's shadow no longer haunted her. His silence was broken. His truth, though painful, had set her free. As the night wrapped around her, Amara whispered to herself, to her father, to the watching spirits, "Silence is not peace. Only truth can heal blood." And for the first time since the funeral, she felt light in her chest.